he was struggling, as all pastors do from time to time. But things were moving forward. I mean, they just were. He'd started a church, and people actually had left jobs and moved to where he was to plant the church. He had had friends, lifelong friends, who he had bonded with. Incredible things were happening in this new church plant. And it was growing. They were busting at the seams. They had to change locations. And his best friend was with him the whole way. They were so close. They were in each other's homes. Their kids knew each other and each other's birthdays, and they hung out together, and their spouses went shopping together, and they were just best friends. But one day they got into a major argument, big-time argument. And they really had a falling out. And as this pastor told me the story, he said, it's like we're best friends. He gets mad. He'll get over it in 2 or 3 days. I'll call him up. We'll work it out. We'll go to lunch. It'll be okay. So sure enough, about 3 days later, he called, and this is before cell phones were incredibly plentiful. He called the house. His wife answered the phone, and she was sobbing. He said, "What's wrong?" She said, "He took his life. He's gone." And he said, "I don't know if I even remember hanging up the phone." But he said, "I remember a conversation I had with a pastor at lunch years ago. When I sat down and talked to this pastor, who was a mentor of mine, he'd planted churches for years. He was very successful. And I asked him the question. I said, if you had one thing to tell me about planting a church, if you had one thing to tell me about being a fruitful pastor, what's the one thing you would tell me? I mean, just one thing, one word, one line, one sentence, whatever." He said, "I remember leaning in, and he just said, 'You sure you want to know?' He said, 'I'm all ears.' He said, 'You will be broken. You will be broken.'" And he remembered, like every other month, something would happen. A family he knew and enjoyed or whatever, they left for another church. Somebody wanted to make a big gift to their fund, and then they decided, nah, just some letdowns here and there. And he thought, well, is that it? He even called the guy up a couple times and said, "Man, this was pretty critical. He said, I don't think that's it." But he said when he went to the funeral of his best friend, he said, "I was broken." And he said that next Sunday, I tried to put on my best preacher face I could, and I started in the text, and I tried to be hopeful. I tried to, get the congregation motivated that, hey, God is here, and we can move forward. And he said, I started preaching. I got about a third into the message. He said, I just had to stop and say, I am so faking it today. He said, I'm just so broken. And he apologized to his best friend's wife. He apologized to their kids. He apologized to the congregation. And he said, never in 1,000 years would I've ever let this go for 3 days. I let my friend down. He said, as a church, I don't want us to ever let each other down. I want us to be there for each other. I'm just so broken today. I don't even know if I can pray. And all of a sudden, people just leaped out of their seats. It was just like they just started coming everywhere, and people started laying hands on him. And he said that moment was electrifying for that church and for that congregation. And that broken pastor I'm talking about, I'll probably have about 85 or 90,000 people view worship services tomorrow. About 14 different states, 80 different venues. His name's Craig Groeschel.